UK-based mega YouTuber now turned pop star and boxer KSI has released an Amazon original documentary titled In Real Life. Legendary documentarian and investigative journalist Louis Theroux is credited as one of the 2 exec producers for this film. However, the director themselves is actually Wesley Politt, who is frankly a little less impressive and a lot less experienced. Now the question to ask here is how much experience and expertise does it actually require to make an interesting documentary about one of Britain's most popular people? And will this lack of star power actually negatively affect the product? Well, that's what we're here to discuss. First thing to say is there are certainly aspects and plot lines to this doc that work a lot better than others, and some that don't work nearly as well. And although I'm going to start with my biggest issue, don't fret because there are things that I did genuinely enjoy that I will get onto. That being said, the editing on this doc is horribly bland and unoriginal. We've seen the rise to fame style of storytelling in the introduction pretty much every doc involving someone who rose from an online presence. There's just so many fake computer screens throughout the entire documentary and it gets really dull stylistically. Why would we need to think of an original way to get from place to place when we could just play some stock footage of wherever we're at that point as some washed out audio plays? Is there a reason for speech from a podcast to be so washed out? Not really. We need to think of a way to present a boxing match. Do we maybe switch up the angles a little bit? Play with the lighting? Camera work? Some cuts perhaps? Nah, let's just cut some bits of the fight footage in over some royalty-free rock music to signify that this is supposed to be an action-packed moment. Which is made even funnier by the fight itself being so painfully dull that the music doesn't even feel appropriate. This would be fine for a free, humble YouTube video, but in what's meant to be a professional documentary, it just comes across as amateur. And on that topic, the music is as equally boring as the shot composition, and once again usually just sounds like stock or royalty-free tunes. There is absolutely nothing special or memorable about the pieces used here. Now aside from those passages, the other songs we get are those from the titular KSI himself, which makes sense of course, but doesn't work too well if you're not really a fan of his sound to begin with. Whilst I think Not Over Yet was used decently and holds up as a pretty enjoyable pop song, by far the worst choice was the usage of the song Holiday. Not only is this song pretty soulless and easy to dislike to begin with, but for whatever reason they choose to play it over the cool Misfits boxing matches to finish the doc. And on top of that, those matches have some really obnoxious and hilariously fake punch sound effects and bone cracks that are so unneeded. There's no narrator, which is an odd choice because it makes quips, comedy and intrigue a lot more difficult to implement. And the narration we could have had is replaced with frankly repetitive exposition via the same yellow text in front of the same black backgrounds. Yeah, that's really interesting and engaging, that is. The closest thing we get to narration is KSI answering questions over what genuinely once again looks like stock footage. It's difficult to derive what this film was going for exactly. From what I can tell, it seems to want to be an in-depth character study on this bloke's insane rise to fame, which is a fine idea and could be a really engaging story, but the structure jumps all over the bloody place, because there isn't really a narrative. The whole doc jumps from place to place for around 18 months of the guy's life, so it really meanders for long stretches at points, particularly in terms of touring and music, and so much of it is unfortunately just boring and not very well done. Let's take the beginning of the doc for example, where in an attempt to display how famous the man is, they show him playing at Reading Festival for like 10 minutes. But at this point, it's not even been shown where he's come from, so there's not much of an effect. A slight side note, but they also use Killer Keemstar as a means of transitioning into topics on multiple occasions, which is pretty impossible to take seriously. Thinking about it now, the worst part of the doc were these music sections, so everything related to touring and music production was really shallow and vapid, with far too much time devoted to it. Now the strongest part of the documentary without a doubt is the family aspect of KSI's life. Everything relating to his brother and parents was a lot more engaging and exciting and important than the music or the businesses, for example. And the doc would have been a lot better with a shorter runtime and a further emphasis on this aspect. Learning more about how a megastar was raised and brought up and how false the relationship we saw on screen could be at points was something that was genuinely shocking. I think that whilst the aforementioned Deji vs Wasabi fight was presented terribly, everything surrounding the fight before and after was pretty good.
How you feeling? How you feeling, bro?
I'm crying.
Why are you crying? It's okay, bro. I cried in my camp. It's good. I cried in my camp.
It was nice to see how Deji's family interacted with him far from, directly before, and directly after the fight.
I'm terrified of losing.
In fact, I think Deji did a good job in general, and was a lot more articulate and detailed in his explanations than much of the other characters. KSI's parents were also a genuine highlight, and the documentary does a serviceable job presenting the surreality of realizing that you've raised someone like KSI. It's almost made me wish the documentary was more focused on the 4 family members, with the rest sort of resting on the back burner, privy to a slight mention or rundown. About 2/3 into the film, we reach what is easily the emotional climax, as KSI is so distraught by the coldness of his African upbringing that he's brought to tears by it all, the uncut and unedited nature of which aid in justifying the in real life title, as this is probably as real as someone like KSI is willing and able to get in front of millions. Now, despite this, for some inexplicable and ridiculous reason, the documentary decides it would be a good idea to bring this emotional momentum to a screeching and heavily jarring, absurd, powerful halt in favour of a 2012 British vlogger-style house tour. There is nothing entertaining about a multi-millionaire showing us how great his house is, at least in my opinion. And I understand that this is a documentary fundamentally for KSI fans, but if you mean to tell me that the only target audience for this doc are people who are so obsessed with this man that they would genuinely be entertained and interested by how many bedrooms and toilets he has, then I don't know what to tell you other than you're lost. Admittedly, the movie does end on a high note with a conversation between JJ and his father. Like, that was an actually nice and heartfelt moment, and it was easily the scene with the least production. I particularly enjoy how it doesn't shove an agenda in our faces or tell us who to side with, and just sort of lets us make our own mind up. This final 5 minutes or so is what I'd expect from the title KSI in real life, because when it's so overproduced and sonically and visually packed and edited at points, it doesn't really feel like real life at all. I think the best documentaries are the ones where you realize that you're really interested in something that you didn't even realize you didn't care about until you watch it. Something like 2016's Tickled, for example, which is centered around a concept most people wouldn't have even heard of, but due to the direction and witty commentary and brilliant music and presentation, can be enjoyed by anyone in my opinion. If you're not all too invested in KSI, there is absolutely nothing to be salvaged from this documentary. There is no reason for you to watch it. And if you are invested in KSI, then you'll be disappointed by how much of what is being spoken about you already know, because it's not like we're only getting new or exclusive information here. In fact, a large percentage of the runtime is just his YouTube videos with little to no additions. Or maybe an unscheduled random interview with some fan who gives an impromptu and shallow explanation as to why they connect with the titular character. It would have been a lot better with a more strict and obvious focus, as opposed to constantly jumping around such an idiosyncratic lifestyle whose music and businesses might not make for the most engaging or emotional documentary content. I actually do think a documentary of this intent could be amazing and inspiring and emotional, exciting, and all the emotions that you want to feel from a film like this. But unfortunately, it would require skills far beyond what this group of talent is capable of, because KSI in real life suffers from padding, boredom, and messiness, to name just a few flaws. It's evident how distorted KSI's idea of his own worth is. He dislikes his appearance, he does not believe he's talented, he dislikes the character he's played, he dislikes the relationships in his life, he doesn't fare well in his own company, he's desperate to please, needing to make people laugh, he's relentless in his pursuit of next success, and he's anxious and dissatisfied. This might be a terrific documentary if it addressed these with more care and depth, rather than as something that needed to be fixed and salvaged by the end of 90 minutes. Instead, it attempts to cover every aspect of his life, spending nowhere near enough time on each part, and thereby leading to an extremely surface-level, shallow, and uninteresting watch. Hence my insistence that it would have benefited from a clearer focus on the strongest part, that being the family aspect. Regretfully for KSI in real life, I'm feeling a 4 out of 10, verging on a 3, to be brutally honest. Actually, no, it's definitely a 3. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. As always, all likes and comments and subscriptions are very much appreciated. Much love to you all. And if the Arctic Monkeys video is anything to go by, I'm going to go brace myself for what's about to erupt in this video's comment section.